welcome back to Gatekeepers. My name's Jade, and this is my tavern. And tonight we're going to be discussing it's not a dungeon, it's an underground fortified defense installation. For those of you who have been following us, you'll know that we've had some of these things slated for well over a month. I have received word that other affiliate members of the Gatekeepers Discord have covered this topic today, but, well, it was scheduled, and we're just going to go on with it. If you are not subscribed to myself or any of the panelists on show tonight, please consider giving them a subscribe. If you do enjoy the content tonight, please consider, well, hitting that like button. Without further ado, this is Gatekeepers. My name is Jade, as I said at the beginning, and I'm going to bring on my only current panelist. I'm thinking some other people might be joining us here a little bit later tonight, but please welcome Shadow from Shadow and Sons to the
evening,
stream.
folks. How's everybody doing tonight?
Hello, Crafting Gamer. So, how are you tonight, Shadow?
I'm doing great. No complaints.
Okay.
Had a good day. I mean, they're all good when you're retired, so.
I can imagine.
If they're not, you're doing something wrong. Or you live in the wrong area.
Or that, yeah, I can see that. Or you retired way too late in life. Here's that.
Yeah.
So. Oh, awesome. I'm just, waiting for a few more people to trickle into the stream. So far, this is a topic that I think is kind of one of those ones that, people talk a lot about, but I've rarely, from the notes I've taken on other people's content on, like, what is a dungeon and how do you design one, I rarely walk away with decent enough notes to be able to employ their method to make a dungeon on my own. Now, a lot of people, there's a lot of thought out there about, like, what exactly is a dungeon and, why include them in a game, or, what constitutes something to include into my game as a dungeon. And I kind of want to breeze over some of those things pretty early on as far as, like, what constitutes a dungeon.
You mean besides the literal definition?
Well, the literal definition of a dungeon is quite literally a prison within a keep or a castle. Like that. That's the literal definition of a dungeon.
Right. I've always had a love-hate relationship with that word. I even as a kid, I understood, the definition, and I realized that, well, hey, there's only so many times I'm actually literally going to build a dungeon, and only so many legitimate reasons for going in there. Prison break, prison escape, a couple other, reasons, so-and-so died in a dungeon and you got to track down their body, or they were never heard from again, or it's an ancient dungeon under a castle and you're, exploring the ruins of said castle. You might as well explore the dungeon as well. And it turned into this crazy, modern day definition of, some sort of, impossibly high-tech labyrinth with tricks and traps and puzzles and all this goofy crap. I tend to actually run my underground explorations as more realistic. They're, either a system of caverns or, just the underground areas under a castle. They're not necessarily the dungeon. There may be a dungeon as part of it, but, and the whole mega dungeon thing, while I've done it, it just seems more and more board gamey, as time goes by. So I've come up with other things to have underground.
And I agree. You know, the actual definition of a dungeon is typically a prison of a castle or keep. But in line with the modern definition of a dungeon in terms of role playing games, you know, I don't think a dungeon needs to be just underground. You know, there's no reason for it to be just that. The encounter space can be quite literally anything.
Yep.
You know, maybe it's time for a definition change, but I'm not that guy. I don't know. Or a word change.
Yeah,
Because, you know,
more inclined for a word change. The
yeah,
original
word
definition.
change, then definition change. Yeah.
DM
Yeah.
James did a video a while back where he turned a forest into, you know, the forest was the dungeon. There were parts of the forest you just couldn't traverse because of shrubbery and foliage,
Mhm.
and there were paths that you could go on. And it was a real neat, idea. A lot of people didn't like it. A lot of people think, no, dungeons got to be underground. Well, then tell us what the word is, and we'll start using that word. You could use maze or labyrinth or, adventure setting, for the night.
Mhm.
Because what other word is there? It's not coming to either of our, minds at the moment.
I'm gonna call it the encounter space at this point. You know,
I
sure
like the
it's the
word
dungeon.
tomb.
It's
Tomb's a great one,
tomb. Yeah.
tomb rating, works.
Yeah. I
There
mean,
were
it's
quite a
very Indiana
few of
Jones.
the there were quite a few of the original AD&D modules that were tombs, and that works just fine. Or cairns or barrows or whatever. There's a lot of things you can have underground. The Mines of Moria. That
Yeah. That's cool.
was more dungeon than most other dungeons, and it was what? Oh yeah, mines.
Well, at that juncture, I would have called it more of a mausoleum or a
Right,
um.
but originally its intent was
Well, yeah, you're right. The original
rip,
intent.
rip, 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 rip Tolkien dwarves. But yeah, rest in peace, guys. But yeah,
So
I mean, it literally had more of a dungeon feel than most
yeah,
other dungeons that I've either seen on a screen or even played in. It had just this grandeur of it, and I honestly try to take a lot from, especially the movie, The Fellowship of the Ring, when I've designed dungeons over the years. That sort of visual scope, instead of these tiny little, 10-foot wide corridors mazing around, filling a sheet of graph paper that would, quite literally collapse in on itself because of the poor construction.
that's magic. I'll hold it up. So,
I don't know, man.
all right, we're coming in on the 9 minute mark, so let's dive into this, shall we?
Sure.
So, when you think of dungeons, or whenever you get ready to sit down and design a dungeon for your game, is there a framework or methodology that you use for your dungeon design?
Well, like I said before, I place my dungeons on the world map. Okay.
Hmm.
And they're not always, just here is or was a castle and there's a dungeon underneath it. There are a lot of other things, and I'll just, I'll put, the tombs or the barrows or the cairns or one of my favorites that I did recently. It wasn't a dungeon, it was a underground highway per se through the mountains. The dwarves had tunneled and created this gigantic, you know, it was just a giant hallway that went from point A to point B, and point B was on the other side of the mountains, so that trade and commerce could go without having to go the long way around. And it went up and down because of the natural caverns and crevices they would discover as they were digging through this mountain. Because if you were to dig through a mountain, you would find some big open spaces. And if there's suddenly a giant drop, we're gonna have to make stairs down and then go back up, that sort of thing. And this highway, this tunnel, was like 100 feet wide and massive, you know, multiple miles deep. And I would just have, for the most part, I only drew the encounter areas. Everywhere they went, it was 100 feet wide, so they had plenty of space to move. But there would be bridges and chasms to traverse and winding stairways and things like that. And every once in a while, they get to a little bit different feature, or there'd be side passages for rest areas. So if your caravan going through here needs to rest, you can go off to the left or right and camp for the night with certain facilities, water and things like that. And anybody else who wanted to just keep on going, you wouldn't be blocking the road. And so it was a very successful dungeon. Had a lot of the typical tropes. No traps though, because who's going to put a trap there? And I kind of feel that traps are either beyond the tech level of the situations we usually see. Some of these traps would be impossible for them to literally build, but yet we have the pit traps, the falling 10-ton block. How would they do that? Is that like a one-time thing, or then they have to have like 100 orcs come in and lift it up and put it back in place and reset the machinery? Nobody would do that. You know what I mean? Even in government installations, we just have doors. They just close and lock. There are no gas traps. There are no portcullises coming down, all that goofy stuff. I'll put some things, I'm not going to just completely, no, never going to be any traps. Sorry, you ran a thief, sucks to be you. But the proliferation that we saw growing up as kids was quite crazy. I mean, you had to try to check everything because there was like a 1 in 2 chance that anything you came across was trapped, be it a door or a treasure chest. It was just nobody went to that effort. Any kind of tricks that would be similar to traps would be a lot simpler and thus a lot easier to discover, or the fact that it had been sitting there, that spring is now rusted and it's just not going to work anymore. You know what I mean? So.
And Charlotte brings up a good point. Who would put the trap there is merely a question of whom the current occupants of the dungeon might be. You are correct. Sometimes these dungeons are mostly ruins or long forgotten places that someone else is currently inhabiting, and they're trapping the areas that are not used as common thoroughways because you don't want to be trapping your primary entrance or egress because you have to traverse it. So likely the traps would be, and likely the traps would be for anyone who's unaware of your existence or unaware of the other main entrance, or if they are aware of it, they're trying to find a back door. So,
and the back doors would be the things that would be or the vault doors or the treasure chests themselves. And even then,
right.
I'd like to see someone actually make a spiked needle trap in today's technology, or a poison gas trap with their technology. When they had things like spells that would do it so much easier.
Yeah. I mean, poison gas, you could definitely do with the technology level of actually a bronze era. You could do gas trap. You could also do the same with, I want to say, a spring needle trap or a poisoned needle trap. You could actually do that with, again, bronze era technology. You just had to have someone who was a master at the craft who could actually make the spring or make the needle mechanism work. And those are not going to be dime a dozen.
Yeah, exactly. And it just because they could do it with the tech level doesn't mean anybody thought of it yet.
Right.
It took lots of other developments to get there. So I, kind of, snares and things like that, sure. But a lot of other things, it really depends on the situation. But we're getting off track.
So,
but for the
we
most
are
part, I just tend to put, obvious things that would have reasons to go underground that aren't just your literal by the word the definition of dungeon.
Sure. For me, I am going. So the way I used to do it is I would go find maps or whatnot and just slapdash things into my game. And honestly, I'm gonna be straight up and honest with everyone. I was young, arrogant, and stupid. Um, and I've since learned, if I want a dungeon that's gonna fit in my world, I have to build it for my world. So I've kind of taken a minimalist, wow, my words today, minimalist approach to my dungeon framework. And by that, I mean I build out my framework of what my dungeon's theme is first, and then I design my dungeon around my framework. Anything that doesn't fit, I kind of leave out on the cutting room floor, basically. But the things I leave out, if they don't fit, I will find something that does fit and put it in there. Hey, multi gunman, how you doing?
So multi.
So, from there, I guess we're going to be doing the show a little bit different tonight. Instead of the whole round robin, we're going to be kind of taking turns building a dungeon or going over our methodology of how we build dungeons. Kind of a showing of here's where I start and here's where I get to. So I'm going to have Shadow go first, if you don't mind, sir.
Okay.
So,
well, let's go with. Go ahead.
Yeah, walk me through how you build a dungeon.
Well, obviously, you take a piece of graph paper, but even before then, I've got to have a location on my map, might that be my world map or the town map, whatever, if that's the case. But usually it's something, far away from the town, the usual, sewers and things like that. I've done it. I've done it even recently, but it was the sewers of part of, the castle that the players were trying to sneak into, and the best way they found to sneak into it was to sneak in through the drainage system that eventually led to the dungeon that would then from there actually lead up into the upper levels of the castle, all of which was built in, basically in a mountain. The castle was at the upper part of the mountain and everything else was below, and they found a way to sneak in. And I think about all of the things that who would live there and what they would need to live there. They need their privies, they need their storage room, they need their bedrooms, they need their kitchen, they need all these different rooms, your basic living spaces, training areas, and then situate them, starting either with a front entrance or a back entrance or something like that, or with the overall perimeter of the castle, so certain things aren't going to be too far out from underneath the castle walls. Otherwise, you have to deal with the weight of the walls or the weight of the mountain coming down and crushing the excavations that are being done, even if they're shored up with bricks and things like that. You really got to think about how tunneling and excavation works. If you don't have even a little bit of working knowledge, you're going to end up with one of the old school graph paper dungeons where almost every square is some area you can walk in, and just a little bit of walls to divide the rooms and holding up the ceilings, which if you look at some of the older dungeon modules and things like that, there's just no way the ceilings would wouldn't collapse in on the players or whatever, maybe even before they ever got there, because there's more tunnels than there are walls holding up the ceilings. And that really, after a while, really starts to build in on itself. If you look at like the pyramids, there's 100 times more brick than there is missing brick for the tunnels and the stairways. All of that is needed to hold it up, and that works just as well underground. There's for every X amount of tunnel, you need like 10 times more amount of surrounding walls and ceiling to keep it all from collapsing in on itself. So once I've got, you know, the location and the purpose of the location, then I can just go by what would be necessary for the amount of people to survive and live underground or live in the castle or what have you, and have plenty of room. And I don't mean just bare minimum room. You're not going to do something like this unless it's, you know, an emergency situation and you're tunneling to get away from someone. I don't know if you guys are familiar. I think it's Darren Kuyo. It's a place underground in Turkey, I think. It's this massive underground structure. It's all hollowed out. I don't know how they did it, but they found it accidentally. Somebody was, you know, like fixing a wall in their home, and on the other side, they found an impromptu entrance into this giant underground excavated place. And it was massive. It had so much more space than the probable number of people, which was in the tens of thousands that lived there, because you know you cramp people in too much, you know, in any space, they're going to start fighting each other, getting into arguments, and the overall morale is going to drop. You need some open air spaces. You need some room to move around. So I put all of that into the design of, let's call it a dungeon for lack of a different word right now, to make it all seem realistic. I can't tell you how many dungeons I've been into, and there wasn't the equivalent of a restroom, okay, or a privy or a tunnel that led to the, you know, the septic tank or anything like that. There was literally no, you know, mention of it. Most of the time when you're designing anything to be put on a map, be it a town or a dungeon, you need to remember everything living needs food and water, and a place to get rid of that food and water. Because if you don't, you end up with aughts, or however you pronounce those weird poop monsters with the tentacles and the eyes, and you know what I'm talking about? You
Yeah.
end up with those, or worse, you know, you end up with a bunch of people or creatures that are, you know, dealing with all kinds of infections and nastiness, carrion crawlers, and all those things. Maybe that's how they attract them, by not taking care of it. That's where they come from. But you'd be hard pressed to go into any of the original Advanced Dungeons and Dragons modules and actually find the room or the area where all of that takes place. It's just, people don't have to poop in D&D. So,
Yeah.
you know, I know it's a gross subject, but they literally don't. Just like in movies, nobody ever has to go to the bathroom. Well, except the Watchmen. That was a great scene. But so I plan all that stuff too. You've got to have, if you follow the web comic Order of the Stick, they make fun of that trope, that there's no bathroom. I see, I'm totally unfamiliar with it, but
they do.
you know, they're not the only ones who thought of it. I've had to put it in dungeons for 40 plus years now, because I'm like, where do people go?
Right.
And you know, not just that, but okay, there's only so much dry goods and other foods that you can store. Sometimes you actually need a place to have, you know, animals. You can't just, you know, expect to import nothing but, you know, tons and tons of salt pork and things like that, you know, the equivalent of canned foods of the era. You have to actually make allowances for that, or they need to be really close to a farmland to raid or get their food from. Otherwise, maybe that's where orcs and goblins come from, you know, advanced cases of scurvy and things like that. I you know, I've always made allowances for that. You know, a lot of dungeons have the old trope of the giant mushrooms. That only goes so far. You know what I mean? If you've got wizards and clerics, there's a whole lot of spells that create artificial or real sunlight spells. You can have, you know, green rooms, you know, or greenhouses underground. You don't actually have to have real sunlight, and that could make for an interesting room in a dungeon. The wizards put a continual sunlight spell or whatever, or you know, and then you've got a room full of plants. And if you know, you leave the corn untended to for, you know, hundreds of years, who knows what you're going to get? Maybe that's where shriekers come from, or other, you know, vegapygmies and things like that, that, you know, will self-populate your dungeon. We've already talked about the carrion crawlers, the aughts. Now you've got, shriekers and vegapygmies. This is all from if you were to take just a regular underground complex that someone built under their castle and then they left. And all this stuff could continue to self-populate a dungeon, maybe not with the most, awesome or interesting monsters, but you could also account for things like ropers and piercers and all kinds of other semi-intelligent to intelligent monsters that would just come from just abandoning a good old-fashioned underground installation.
So then, from your abandoned installation, where does the challenge then come from for the players to then, explore and experience?
Probably, the usual trope of figuring out what happened. Looking for the records, looking for the diaries, looking for, the dead bodies of the people who didn't make it out. Those will often have clues. Or, maybe they didn't move. Some sort of madness overtook them, like in Red Nails from Conan, or other, what was that movie, Descent? Those people just, went, loco, and maybe, they dug too deep and suddenly orcs and kobolds or things like that popped out and took them out. There's all kinds of reasons, but usually it's trying to discover the mystery, unless it's literally like we talked about earlier, some sort of tomb raiding adventure. They know that this is the ancient burial grounds of so and so, and supposedly a paladin died and was buried here, and of course he was buried with his holy sword. If you guys can manage to find his dead body, maybe you can have the cleric do a speak with dead and get permission from the paladin, tell him, look, evil is, running rampant across the land, and our paladin Fred over here, he really needs a holy sword. So can he borrow yours? And, that could be the entire reason for going there. Or you could be a bunch of murder hobos and you found, the lost tombs of so-and-so, and you're just going to get whatever you can grab and skedaddle. More often than not, these days it seems like fewer and fewer people actually want to run the heroes. So tomb raiding it is.
Don't worry there, Shadow. I'll be hopefully running a paladin here in the near future. I've got a
paladins are the true essence of Dungeons and Dragons, as far as I'm concerned. They make up the most prolific type of fictional characters that went on quests. It was very rare that anybody else really did until modern-ish fiction started branching off in different directions. But good for you.
Yeah, that's I'm actually going to be joining Scott's table for that as a paladin. So it's going to be very much the Redeemer paladin. Yeah.
Let me know how that turns out for you.
Yeah, we'll do. So let's see here. I'm just looking through all the prompt questions here. So do you make it possible for your players to find the origins of the place before it exists, when it first existed? Do you make it possible for them to find out what happened before?
It's absolutely possible. It's entirely on the heads of the characters or the players if they care. If they want to do the research, they'll find out all kinds of stuff. Because I like libraries. I'm actually going to show off a library here later on that I can build in a matter of minutes for my gaming table. That's like the bread and butter of the magic users. And, to be honest, even the rangers and the thieves have ample reason to go and look for written down information about anywhere they're going. And of course, druids. I mean, literally anybody, can come up with that idea. Hey, let's check the Hall of Records or the library or the local authorities and see if they know of anything about this place that we found a treasure map to, or we want to go explore or something like that. Mind you, they may need to grease a couple of palms to get the information and keep people quiet. Even though most people that found out that, hey, these guys are going to go rob this tomb, well, sucks to be them because it's trapped and there's monsters, and none of us are brave enough to have done it already. Otherwise, when they get there, they'll find an empty dungeon because it's been okay. Yeah, exactly. Look up that's what I just said, Darren Kuyu, a little while ago. That place is amazing. There's lots of examples of that, but that's what I was getting at is, yeah, if they want the information, all they have to do is look for it in some pretty easy to access places, unless information is also one of those guarded secrets, which a lot of times here on Earth it was, but I try to stay away from a lot of those really earthly tropes as much as possible. If the players ask around, they can get some. If it's a tomb, I might leave some carvings they can find. Yeah, exactly. The more clues you give them, the more their imagination is going to work with it and, go off in all kinds of different directions that you didn't think of. And then that forces you to, stay involved with the game, not just, reading out of a module or, looking at your own notes going, oh, nope, I didn't write that down, so it doesn't exist. You have to improvise. You have to, stay on your toes and help them out to find more enjoyment out of this game. There's so many ways that the players will surprise you, and that's one of the most enjoyable aspects of these hobbies.
So, when you're designing a dungeon for your game, do you ever include arbitrary geometry or architecture that just doesn't make sense at all, like random dead ends or?
Okay, random dead ends. If it's a random dead end, it's going to have some things in it. It's going to have a pick and a shovel and a wheelbarrow and things like that because they're not done. Otherwise, there's no reason for it. But I've done it in the past. We've all done some really dopey things in the past when it comes to dungeon design. But especially the dead end that turns into a trap. We went down this tunnel, and it once it turns around a corner or two, then we find out we can't go back because there's portcullises or a sloping trap that drops us into something. Nobody's going to go to that kind of effort and build that. When you think about it from the point of the player characters, when you get to your 10th level and you start building a dungeon, under your castle, and you find out what it costs, you're not going in for that crap. You're just not just going to buy extra strong padlocks. Lots of locked doors are a lot cheaper than traps.
Well, I mean, I might consider a trap door, like, or not necessarily a trap door, but a secret door as a dead end in a tunnel. And I might litter around my pickaxes and shovels and wheelbarrows just to, be like, oh yeah, I'm not done digging there yet. But secretly the boulder moves.
Right. I secret doors, that's totally different. Those I get. Those are fun as hell, especially in libraries. I mean, you pull the candlestick. Who doesn't love that trope? I mean, come on, that's like whoever invented that one. Seriously, that was pure genius. But the like the pit traps or the stone block trap, things like that. The Indiana Jones, arrows shooting at you. I wouldn't even know where to start to build that as a player character without having a couple of high level magic users to make that stuff work. And then who reloads it every time it goes off? You got to get someone to pick up the darts and re-dip them in the poison and put them, individually spring load them or whatever. That sounds like a lot of work. And mind you, I'm talking about, because if you think about it, most TMs don't like to have a lot of high-level NPCs. The castle was built by a 10th level fighter, and then he retired, and that was it, and he stayed 10th level. So if he's only 10th level and his wizard friend is like 11th level, what can an 11th level wizard get away with? Only so much. Now, you know what I mean? if the fighter was,
Well,
15th level and his magic user buddy was like 18th level, well, then you're looking at wishes or all kinds of 9th level spells that he could put into building his traps, and in which case he's just going to put a bunch of glyphs of warding everywhere and things like that are super easy. None of this dig and pass wall and stone shape that actually takes a lot more work, or hiring a bunch of dwarves to come in, and then you got to kill all the dwarves because they know the secret. You know how dwarves talk. If you think they're not going to have a couple of beers and start talking about their latest job, you don't know dwarves that well. They're these secrets will get out, so it makes it really hard to justify some of the tropier tropes that we've come to love. So I
I don't
try to
know.
keep it kind of simple.
I don't know. I've depending on the amount of time and resources I have as an 11th level wizard, I could come up with some really great things.
But then you got to
And Scott
realize, or
says,
you got to back.
not have a lot of high level NPCs, really.
Well, the
Um,
average DMs out there, especially back in the day when we were just getting into this, the average was more like 7th. The king was the 10th level guy. Okay, if I can't poke fun at dwarves, who can I poke fun at? Okay, I mean,
yeah.
have you met me, Bo? I'm gonna everybody. Gnomes are probably next, but you also got to figure, why aren't they living in this dungeon or this castle or these ruins anymore? Okay, well, they died. Were they killed because somebody had sacked their castle? Well, okay, they sacked the castle and probably caved in, stairs and things to the lower areas of the dungeon, and that's why you can go in and explore it, because someone foolishly just used catapults and just toppled the castle because they just wanted the guy dead. Where'd the wizard go? Did he survive? Did he stay till the last minute, or did he teleport out and go, sorry, dude, I'm out of here. I can only carry me and my stuff. So, you know, sorry, you're stuck here. Captain's going down with his ship, so to speak. And if not, and the wizard, passed away, great, because then he leaves behind his wand or his staff somewhere, because, that's how
Or a
player
spell book.
characters find those things. That's how players get those things. Otherwise, you know, magic using isn't going to be, all that fun to play. Which some GMs like to pick on those guys, and personally, I think there's some of the more interesting characters for me to watch players play. They usually come up with the more long-term interesting goals and projects, where a fighter, he builds his castle, he's ready to sit on the throne and get fat, and that's it, he's done. Unless someone kidnaps his
Spider-Man,
wife,
Spider-Man. Overall,
someone
he's
kidnaps
fairly bland.
someone kidnaps his wife or kids, then he's got to go on that one last crusade or what have you. After that, what's left, right? The second mouse gets the
Yep.
cheese. Never heard that one before. That's good. That's good, Bo. Oh, hey, Bo, how's it going?
Yep. I like that one too. The wizard was taken down by his own power and slaves. Yeah.
Sure.
When Marhawkman is referencing what game is that? Dragon Quest. Rock bombs are just annoying in Dragon Quest. Absolutely annoying. There's no point to them.
I think I'm thinking of a different game, but I love it when the party finds another dead party in the dungeon. I think it's even more fun when they find them alive, and you've got two parties. When I was dungeon mastering or as a player in the early days, and the DM rolled up another adventuring party, that was the best, because they had better treasure than anything else in the dungeon. They literally did. It was like, what? There's a fighter, a magic user, a cleric, and a thief down there. Get them, because they not only did they have the treasure that the magic items that the DM wanted to use against you, because he needed a +1 weapon or +2 plate mail, stuff like that. But oftentimes, if the DM was smart or or clever or thinking. They also had some treasure from some of the rooms they cleared out for you. So yeah, you got to take them. I don't care if they're chaotic good and you're chaotic good. That was just the way it was. We didn't have detect alignment. How many times did you always carry around a detect evil spell in a dungeon? I mean, that's what the paladin's for. If not, nobody memorized it. Up, he's got horns in his helmet. Up, get him. He's evil.
Yep, that must be the barbarian.
He's probably evil. He's got horns. Oh gosh, look at his diary. Oh man. Oh, they were going here to get money for an orphanage. Oh well, burn that too.
Interesting. Wargamer Fritz had a video this week where he suggested the player lord finds a lower level party in his keep and sends them on a quest in lieu of hanging them in the circle of life. Not a bad thing, I guess.
It's cool for the players, but dumb for the sorry, Fritz, but no. I'd rather have them do the jailbreak trope than the you've been quested trope. I mean, unless you actually use like the quest spell where they have to go on it, which then really sucks because then that is more sucky than the jailbreak adventure. Well, it depends. I mean, there's a lot of whiny players out there. Oh, you took my stuff. I'm not playing anymore. I hate that. Just deal with it. Your treasure's over there. Trust me. Just find a way out, right?
I don't know, Scott, because when I play that paladin in your next game, I'm probably going to be circumventing a lot of that loot giving because I'm going to be the redeemer paladin. I'm going to be the one who's going, why do we need to fight? So I don't know if that's going to work with me very much. He says, party loves seeing another party arraigned against them because that means we're getting loot.
Sure.
So when it comes to designing obstacles in your dungeons, like ones that weren't necessarily originally part of the original design, how do you design or add challenges to the dungeons without breaking the immersion of the dungeon?
My favorite and easiest one to do is the unstable structure. The entire place is about to cave in. It's about to cave in. That's why nobody lives here. Or it's got, yellow mold all over the place or green slime or something like that. That's why people abandoned it. That's why they left, because they built it on a fault line and, any loud noise or impact somewhere, fireball could easily cause a minor to major cave in. And that really gets the players, yeah, exactly, rotted floors. That really puts the whole, sort of Damocles over the player's head the entire time. They're like, oh crap, man. We're gonna end up running out of here, aren't we, DM? That's how the end credits is gonna be us booking to get the hell out of here, trying not to drop our treasure or even dropping it all just to get out because, we can always dig the treasure back out maybe. But right now it's caving in, so yeah, there's a lot
Just don't
of
leave the staff of power behind.
Right. I play a lot of Shadows of Brimstone, which is a game where your Western characters, go into the old mines to fight Cthulhu or vampires, and that happens so often. Is the something there's a timer, and you've got to do this and hurry up and get in and get out. Otherwise, the threat that's in the caves or the mines are going to escape and attack your nearby town, in which case, when you get out, there's no town to go to, or it's full of ghosts or vampires or stuff like that, or the place is going to cave in and, you could literally either, get sealed in there and, die of starvation or dehydration, or the monsters will eat you while you're stuck in there and they're pissed off because you brought the caves down around them. But what was that? What Bruce say? Find a bullet pup and give it to your pacifist druid friend. Yeah, okay. I just actually finished painting one of those guys right here. It's probably not accurate colors, but it said blue. I went with blue.
Okay. So you've let's see here. What meta knowledge do you allow your players to know about the encounter or dungeon space before they go in?
Before they go in, well, I let them draw their own conclusions by the clues they pick up. If they're smart, they get more, and the more information, the more knowledge they have. Forewarned is forearmed, and if they're gonna do the research and the homework, cool. Otherwise, they're gonna get to the front doors of the dungeon and not know squat, and you know, that's how you find out that the dungeon is too high level for you before you go in. If you catch my meaning.
Mm-hmm.
When you start out like in a video game, you'll start out as a first level character, and all the dungeons within walking distance are usually appropriate level. But if you accidentally go a little further and you don't get killed, and then you find there's this dungeon, and you don't go back home and research it or resupply and then go back and explore it, then you're only asking for the equivalent of walking into the Tomb of Horrors at 4th level. You're all going to die. If you get in, you're all
Yeah,
going to
you
die.
are.
Okay. I like my bullets being more earthly colors. It looks good as it is, though. Thanks. Technically, it's not really called a bullet because it's a Reaper model. But I wanted something just, I've got so many models that are all kind of, like you said, earthlies and greens and stuff. How many big blue lizardy things do I have? I got one now. So I just wanted to, go with something. I could have dirtied them up with dirt and mud effects, but I just wanted something that I could kind of use also as like an alien critter or, for a sci-fi game. But thanks, Bruce. But yeah,
So
as opposed to putting like a sign, outside the dungeon that says 9th level, I try to encourage the players to find out, because if I say, oh, the place is infested by whites, well, they're going to know, okay, those are like 4 hit die monsters and we're 7th level. Yeah, we might be able to take them. Yeah, they're 4 hit die, but if there's 20 of them, there's 4 of us, and we start losing levels, then oh, Foxmud. I wandered into a cave when I was like level 5. There was an ancient dragon in there, and it wasn't far from town. Right. You've got to encourage the players to do the research before they just start jumping into it. Sure, there's nothing like the old hey, we stumbled across this. Let's go. But in reality, would you really? Would you not go back and do a little research and stock up, with, I mean, I like my players to, from a certain point to a certain point, that being first to about 7th level, spending every spare penny they have on supplies to make sure they live through the dungeon, knowing that, like, say the entire party spent, 5,000 gold, because that was their combined treasure. They spent 5 grand to go and clear this dungeon, but then they're going to come out with like maybe 10 or 15. So it's worth it in the end run for them. But, going into a dungeon with pockets full of gold is dumb.
yeah,
You can't spend that
go,
money
go
when you're
store
in the
that.
dungeon. Sure, put it in the bank. Why? Why not put it into, better tools, more rations? If you're lucky enough to be able to buy a couple of potions of healing, you buy the potions of healing. You can never have too many of those. And if you actually think you do, then your DM is doing something wrong.
I agree with Mar Hawkman here. If it was, I think Final Fantasy II, the game tells you which way to go is the next town, and where that's where you should go, and then that's where the level monsters that are appropriate to you are. The other areas, well, that's where you might go to grind for XP, and he is absolutely correct, because Final Fantasy did not care about what level you were. The area had monsters in it that were of a level, and if you weren't that level, you were screwed.
Those were the Game Boy versions, weren't they?
That was the Nintendo, the standard edition Nintendo. edition was Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy 2. It wasn't until Final Fantasy 3 that they switched to the Super Nintendo. And then I think Mystic Quest followed by Final Fantasy 4.
Which ones were on the Game Boy? Because I played a crap ton of Final Fantasy on my own Game Boy.
I think they ported over original Final Fantasy to Game Boy as well as Final Fantasy 2. I know that they put them out recently again. Huh?
Because I know I played I love those games back then.
Yeah. Mark Hockman says it was re-released to the handheld later, and then Bruce says it was SNES. So.
Yeah, I had most of the Nintendos, but I didn't get a lot of use out of them because the games were so expensive at the time for me, at least. It wasn't until the Game Boys came out that I could pick up the cartridges like $5 or $10.
Yeah, I mean, they're comparably expensive now. Like new games now compared to then are roughly the same cost for the compared to the game system itself. A brand new game system back in the 90s was $200, and then a game was $40 to $50. Fast forward now, the game systems are.
Because I remember some games for like that era that were actually sometimes as high as $75. Maybe that's because I'm in California, but
maybe import costs and such.
Some games back in the day were actually more expensive than they would be now in equivalent inflation dollars, if you will.
I could see that for some of the games, yeah.
Especially the games that had the battery backup, the RPGs and stuff like that. They were you had to have the memory. They had to add something different to the cartridge. And fortunately, I know a couple of guys that can actually take those cartridges apart and put in new batteries, and you're good to go for like another 5 years.
Yeah. I also played a lot of, I didn't play FF2 until it came to the PlayStation. I played Final Fantasy 3, 4, 5, all on the SNES. And then my absolute favorite, of course, Chrono Trigger, all on the SNES. Great game system, great games back then. I honestly believe that some of the games from yesteryear, like the mid to early 90s, were some of the absolute best games, even by comparing to today's standards of video games. Like there's no video games that are coming out today that I'm wanting to get into. So I'll play my old SNES games.
I haven't played a video game since before the pandemic. And even then, when I was, my son would find me, asleep with a controller in my hand and my character dead on the screen. I'm actually getting an original Xbox because it had so many actual cool games that I want to actually play. Yeah. Like Knights of the Old Republic, the best Star Wars game ever. Come at me, bro. Bring Bruce back again, please.
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah.
I like the joy of hex crawling.
He's also, absolutely right.
You can set an arcane lock to not open for someone of a certain low level. I don't know why you couldn't do that anywhere else, Bruce. That doesn't.
I mean, you can do that in a hex crawl. You can also do that in non-hex crawls as well. Oh, excuse me, as well. You can always use the arcane lock.
I thought it was like If the players have too much money, maybe introduce the encumbrance and weight rules. Sure. I'm talking about.
I absolutely do.
When they've got bags of holding and portable holes and crap like that they really shouldn't have until maybe a bag of holding. But kind of like +1 swords to +5 swords, you really shouldn't be finding a +4 before you've already had a +2 and a +3. You should kind of have to go through the pouches of holding and the satchel or the quiver before you get the full-on bag or the larger capacity items. I think I know it seems a little, gamey to put those kind of things in there, but if you don't, especially with AD&D, mind you, it ruins the whole progressive level scheme of everything. Everything is kind of tied to what level you are, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you look in the old DMG, the magic items didn't have a, it's a this level item, but the experience points you would gain for it would, you didn't want to give somebody an item that item would bump them up 2 levels. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just by getting it. If you killed an orc, he had this random item, and because you got it, it gave you 6,000 XP, and your 2nd level, now you're 4th level because you found this +2 or whatever item. You could use those XP as a gauge. It's like, oh well, if they get this, it's not even gonna be a, it's not gonna affect their, they need 100,000 XP to go up the next level, and it's a 5,000 XP item. Okay, not a problem. But you give that 5,000 XP item to someone who's 1st or 2nd level, that's a level, right there. So you could kind of judge, if you didn't care about that, that's cool. Let me in your game. You know what I mean? Let me watch you roll up random treasure all day. You know what I mean? Awesome.
Right.
But if you want to go and kind of, prolong the experience as long as possible, make them work for every level and earn it and feel it, then, by all means, look at those XP tables before you give out the treasure and start with the low ones. I even like to, in my DMG, I would put a number by each item. How many in the world are they? How many +1 swords are there? And I would literally write that down. And, every time somebody found one, I'd put a hash mark by it. Yeah, you should see my Dungeon Master's Guide. It's atrocious. But I also colored it with colored pencils. So, but yeah, and I would put how many, hash marks by it, to let myself know, oh, wow, I've given out 5 of these already. Yeah, maybe better hold off on the old wand of fireballs or magic missiles or whatever. But not you, Bloodworth. Keep handing that stuff out because I kid you not. I've got 2 wands. My magic user in his game. I found a wand of magic missiles with 7. I started out with a wand of magic missiles with 7 charges. I've never used it. Okay, and then I found a wand of fireballs that only do 3d6, which I can't imagine why any magic user would make one of those, other than to go here. You suck. Here, have a 3d6 fireball wand. I mean, when I got it, I could already do like 6 or 76 fireballs on my own, and it's got 5
Right.
charges. I'm never going to use that. I'll give it to one of my apprentices here. Now you know how I felt. Don't do that.
So,
Don't do that. It sucks.
So, we've had Shadow explaining how he approaches dungeon design. So I'm going to get into my current and future approach of dungeon design. I started the show with saying I used to just grab random dungeon maps or random modules and drop them into my games. Sometimes I would sit down and map out my own dungeons or my own stuff. And I do enjoy mapping out my own stuff when I have the time for it. But I don't think it was fair to my game world, or my players for me just randomly grabbing stuff that didn't necessarily fit into my world. So my future and method going forward is going to be a very minimalist approach. And I'm going to say minimalist. It's not going to sound minimalist, but here's what I mean. I'm going to be keeping things, on a note card. I'm going to be basically bullet frameworking my dungeons. So I'm going to start with something like a power word. This power word is not like the power word spells that you're used to seeing. This is going to be a single word that themes the entire dungeon. So I'm going to pick just one word, and it's going to be, I don't know, divine. So that's going to, everything about my dungeon is going to be divine in nature. From that, I then get into what my simple hidden truth about my dungeon is. And the simple hidden truth is this: it is an extension of the power word. And it is the reason, or in part, it is the reason why the dungeon exists. And I'm going to make this like a 1 sentence long thing. So divine is my power word. So my one sentence long hidden truth is a long forgotten shrine of the gods. From here, I'm going to find out what my tie-in is. My tie-in is, this is something that ties to the characters somehow. And it ties the characters to the dungeon in either a way and related to the power word. So in a way that the players have reason for being there. So this can be as simple as an engraved symbol or a set of runes, be it religious, be it a crest of royalty, or some kind of looted item from the dungeon. Or the players might be carrying a looted item that from somewhere else that relates to this place. Either way, there's going to be some kind of tie-in that relates to the players. And it's going to be visible. It's going to be one of those the things that they just stumbled into in one of the rooms. From there, I look at the senses and substance of my dungeon. And I'm going to make a list of words, 3, 4, maybe 5 words at most. And these are going to be the words I use to describe a scene or the many different rooms within the dungeon. And what I'm trying to invoke with these words are at least 3 of the 5 senses. And they should be tied in some way to, again, the power word. And as well the simple hidden truth. So these words, they can be used to describe terrain advantages or hazards. So if my simple hidden truth is that this is a long forgotten shrine to the gods, my keywords or my sensory words are going to be religious implements or religious symbols. So I've got a visual cue. There might still be the smell of incense or other holy oils and whatnot around. So there might be some smells available to give scent that this was once a holy place, and you can still smell the faint aromas of myrrh and incense. And then I'm going to probably give something of a audio cue, or even a textile cue. There might be like runes etched in, like divine runes etched into the artwork or paneling that might give someone clue as to what this place was used for. And from there, we I then look at making excuses for danger. So I try to find ways to make danger using both the power word and my hidden truth, or my secret hidden truth. And the goal here is to find ways to make mundane things difficult. And this kind of becomes the mechanics of my dungeon. So the roof is collapsing in. The floor is weak in places. The walls are eroding away over time, or nature is starting to reassert itself in this location, and you've got trees trying to grow up through the walls, all making the area a bit weaker. So you might have a random cave-in of a wall if something hits it too hard. So I'm going to be making like my traps natural occurring things. And then we get to the one simple but big fact about my dungeon. This is going to be the reason it has become a dungeon or a ruin, or is otherwise in need of exploration. Be it goblins have moved in to make a lair and gain reinforcements before raiding the next town, or bandits have moved into the abandoned shrine to seek shelter from the king's guard, or the highway men. Whatever the case might be, that is going to be what my main challenge is whatever those is now inhabiting the space. But they have a story behind them as well, because they aren't necessarily the original inhabitants of my dungeon or my ruins. So now we get into the small but complex facts about the dungeon. And this is what the players are going to experience while in the dungeon. These are the actual, like, this is the box text, so to say. If you're running a module, this is where the box text comes in. The walls are made of soapstone and have been wet for so long that there's a layer of slime that is slick to the touch. But as you slide your fingers down the carved runes, you brush against dry, coarse feeling of sandstone instead. So these are things that, this is my framework that I'm going to be using to build my dungeons kind of going forward. I've already started, on this method for my own homebrew stuff. And what I'm finding is if I have the framework in place, I don't need a map. I don't need, a place in my world yet. If I just have the framework of what it was and what it's become, I can therefore make my map based on just that knowledge. And I can place my encounters, my traps, my whatever challenge I want from my framework, as long as I keep it tied to my framework. If I want to include something cool, but it's not part of my framework, I have to either one, revise my framework, or two, leave it out because it doesn't fit. And this will keep my dungeons concise. It'll keep the theme appropriate. I can also, from my my one simple but big fact, I can lead my players to other locations. I can drop clues within that big fact. Where did the monsters come from, or what is actually hidden away in this lost shrine. What was it there originally? Did someone bring it here and hide it here because they thought no one would ever come to seek this place out? And that can lead to other furthering storylines or paths of exploration. Sorry, going through my notes here for tonight's episode. I lost my place. Oh no.
No worries.
I'm a professional
tonight.
YouTuber. I'm a professional YouTuber. This doesn't happen.
I wanted to show some maps myself, but I couldn't find them because I had drawn this this castle with its multiple levels, and when I was designing it, I would lay one level above the other so that I could see how the stone would work to keep it from actually caving in, if you know what I mean. I would put rooms above where there were solid blocks of stonework below, so that everything would support itself logically, which was one of the first times I had ever used that technique because it was like a 10-level mountain fortress, and I wanted everything to really make sense in case they started blasting off fireballs or doing things that would potentially cause a cave-in. I didn't want that sort of thing to happen because there was the potentiality of them taking this place over and turning it into their own. And if they just started, messing up the place, it would just be a dungeon, for their offspring to have to go clear out later on or something like that. So I really, I don't know what I did with them, but I wanted to show how if you draw it, especially if you use like Sharpies to block in the areas that are solid stone, you can see that through the graph paper when you're drawing the next level above it. And you can see, okay, I can put a room here because there's a chunk of stone underneath it, as opposed to putting a room or another hallway on top of another hallway, and even if there's, 10 feet of stone, in between each level, that's not necessarily, enough to really keep it from collapsing from a fireball or stray lightning bolt or something like that, because in AD&D, stonework has, hit points or fortification points or whatever, and that can translate to, how much damage it can survive from a fireball or, a golem or something like that pounding on it.
Yeah. I have a bit of an advantage when it comes to that because I actually took architectural courses when I was in college. So I know like what it takes to keep a building upright. I know where to put load bearing walls and how to design spaces that might seem like they shouldn't be able to support weight, but because of how the substructure is designed, it can support weight. Um, so I mean, and you can see that in a lot of the old Gothic architecture as well. You'll have like flying buttresses going out the back side, and that's all to tie it, to the superstructure of the building to keep it from collapsing. And if those flying buttresses were to suddenly, be taken out or collapse, you would have, a loss of the superstructure as well. So bear with me. I'm just putting to paper my shrine that I was just talking about because I've got it in my head. Might as well. Um, you know, a lot of the hobby is taking things we've seen before and retranslating it in a different way, or stealing it as some might say. And putting it into our games. And, for the longest time, I did do that. I did that with, again, like I said, modules or dungeons I found elsewhere. And I never took the time to fully add them to my game world because I didn't really understand that process. So I'm hoping, some of the things we have discussed this evening has helped with other people, and understanding that to add something to your game world, it needs a reason to be there. You can't just add it carte blanche and have it fit naturally. Um, you need to put in a little bit of time, a little bit of work, and depending on whose method you would like to use or go with, there's multiple GMs out there who've explained their methods of how they put dungeons into their world or encounter spaces into their world. I know Bruce is very much a big fan of the hex crawl, and he'll have a lot of different intrinsic locations already pre-mapped out, and he knows what's there. He may or may not have already drawn it, but it already is fit into the game world. And Shadow, he starts with a big map. I don't. I start with just the framework of what my dungeon is before I even start mapping it or placing it in the world. If I know my party is going to be going against, let's say, a necromancer in a city, well, the city is my dungeon. It's not, it's not going to be underground fortified defense installation. It's going to be the city itself. I'm going to be using parts of the city to have the players combat the forces of undead. So my theme, or my one theme word, our power word of that is going to be probably necropolis. And I'm going to explore all of the potential I can with a necropolis. And then my simple facts of that are going to be, it's a city under siege by the undead, which is forced it to become a necropolis. So you can see from just this framework, you can build just about any type of encounter space. You can go all the way to the elven tree houses or tree fortresses, to the dwarven strongholds. And as long as you've got a framework in place to build upon, you can build just about any type of encounter space or dungeon you want. So are there anyone out there with questions about dungeon design, things we may not have covered yet? Hey, welcome back, Scott. Very little truly new. Yeah, in fiction. Yep, I agree with that. Most of the fiction based on life experiences and ideas that come from imagination, but imagination is fueled by experience. You are absolutely right. Unfortunately, experience is also a horrible teacher because it teaches us lessons we really don't want to learn. Mega Dungeon, I knew we were going to get into this. And random hex crawl interior maps. Random hex crawl interior maps. I have not done an interior map with a hex crawl, only overworld. But Charlotte, how about Mega Dungeon? So Mega Dungeon, this is the Dungeon 23 model, or the Rapanathuk, or fun fact, Tolus Graveyard and Acropolis had a large contingent of young human kids who were groupies for the vampire power groups. So I'm gonna get to Charlotte's here. So the Mega Dungeon is one that I am not a fan of, and here's why. My game world doesn't really have room for a Mega Dungeon, so to say. And in that I mean like a multi-floored, campaign spanning dungeon where there's over 100 rooms that need to be explored, and if I don't like a certain section of the dungeon one week, I lop it off, and it's kind of like this extra planar space. I'm not a fan of it because it just doesn't feel real to me, and it feels board gamey. If I was going to do that, I would really, really consider running any of the D&D board games where they had random dungeon terrain. I'm just gonna say I'm not a fan of Mega Dungeons. Like, don't let me discourage you from playing them because I hear a lot of them are really, really great. I'm gonna get back to Shadow. You're muted, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. There are some that are absolutely wonderful. The Under Mountain, a lot of people don't like it. I had a player who literally bought it and said, "Here, run this for us." I'm like, "Did you see what's on the back? Yeah, it's gigantic. Yeah, I know. We want to do this." I'm like, "Okay, but you're going to find a lot of empty rooms. That's fine." They wanted the full experience. Okay. Some of the Arduino modules that I absolutely love. They're usually 4 levels of dungeon. Each level is what was a piece of graph paper, and David A. Hargrave just filled it with rooms. And when he did it, he only populated 10 rooms per level, even though there would be like 30, and just left it blank for you to make it your own, like B1. So you could put whatever you wanted in it, make it your own, but to not just give you a blank dungeon. He would fill 10 rooms per level, so you got 40 encounters plus wandering monster tables, and they were absolutely a blast. Yes, there are Arduino modules. As a matter of fact, if Travis does not get a hold of me, I'm going to have to re-give out the book of all 4 Arduino modules to somebody else. So if you guys know Travis, tell him to hurry up and give me his mailing address so I can mail it out to him, because he won 2 prizes and he just up and disappeared. And one of the prizes was not 4, but I think 5 or 6 modules, because it included 2 brand new ones that Emperor's Choice came across. And they're goofy, they're indicative of the times, but they were a lot of fun because they had crazy monsters, crazy features, and he went out of his way to describe the room in all its detail, the height, the what the walls were made of, and each room, the walls were like completely different, of which I don't know how they did that, but how they would really build a dungeon like that, where this one's onyx and this one's jade and stuff like that, but they're a lot of fun. And I mean, I know Bo is not a big fantasy guy, but if you ever get in the mood, they're out there waiting for you, and you can get it, Bo, from Emperor's Choice. It's called Vault of the Weaver. just tell them I sent you, and they'll probably send you some more free stickers or something. But yeah, some of you can learn a lot from the old stuff, of things you want to copy and steal, or things you just don't ever want to use because you hate the idea. It's like, well, I'm never going to use this, But either way, you're gonna pick up something. And for a lot of old guys like myself and Laura, if you're listening out there, you remember what it was like by reading these old books. It takes you back to that time, the good memories, maybe the bad memories of what it was like to get into this hobby when nobody knew what the heck it was. I mean, there was a good period of 10 years that this was like a secret. People didn't know about this. This wasn't mainstream. It was like your private little, your own little secret, club or whatever you want to call it, of a hobby, of an activity that not everybody was playing. You couldn't, go to any mall and bump into 10 people wearing a D&D t-shirt type of thing. Yeah, it really is, Bo, but for the most part, I mean, it literally started out as a supplement to the original box set of D&D, and then David just said, you know what, I'm cutting loose. I'm just going to do all the crazy stuff I've ever wanted to do, and when it comes out this year or next, it's going to be one of the games that everybody's going to be talking about, and you'll have heard it here first.
So Scott asks, how do you deal with a dungeon that comes up in gameplay that you hadn't planned on?
Revel in it.
Yeah. I mean, revel in it. If I guess it depends on when it comes up in gameplay. Like if it comes up at the beginning of the night, then why did your players go off in that direction? Being one of those players, I can fully attest it's because I was like, yeah, I see what you're wanting us to do, and I'm going to go running and screaming in the hills because that sounds like I'm going to die.
Don't be that guy. Don't be that guy.
Well, okay. To know Scott's games, like I love being in Scott's games, but there are some times where something like things or encounters will come up, and I'm just like, this is a bad plan. This is not a great plan. I don't want to be a part of that one, and I'll want to head for the hills. Scott, I do know your players, and sometimes they are quite random. But I would say if you, yeah, I know. I would say that if a dungeon comes up randomly, first off, I would probably come up with the power. Like I would try to use the framework method that I explained, but I would try to do it rather quickly and on the fly. And you don't even have to map it out at that point. As long as you have the framework, you can very rapidly build a dungeon around that framework and keep it consistent. And it shouldn't take very long to build a framework like that. In that, if the players, found or wanted to go find this new unique dungeon that you hadn't planned for, take their ideas or some of the things they said and just kind of kit bash the framework from their ideas. And maybe turn some of those ideas on their head, like subvert their expectations a little bit. And you know what, as one of your former and future players, punish me for that. Punish me for not going with what we had already discussed the previous session. Because that's I need to be one of those voices of reason and be a good player. Because I know I've done that to you a couple times, and I apologize, sir. I would say, because coming up with a framework for a dungeon just to keep things consistent and themed takes maybe 5 minutes at most. I don't think it needs to take longer than that, and then from that framework you can just keep building and building and building until you find its ultimate resolve. You can put whatever enemy you want in there as the big bad, and it can both surprise the players and it can lead to further gameplay down the road. So this one's for you, Shadow.
I've never done Temple of Elemental Evil, so I don't know. Undermountain was just it was just too much. I mean, it would have been better, in my opinion, had it been, that they had come up with this 2 foot by 2 foot whatever map for each level, and I mean it was more hallway and room than it was just stone blocks and walls and stuff. It would have been better if there were lots more unevenness to it and random everything. It was just like a gigantic maze, and I'm not a fan of that. Over the years, I like to, if I use a piece of graph paper, there's going to be more black on it than white, if you know what I mean. More
More negative
it's gonna be
space
all,
than
the tunnels and stuff are going to twist and turn and not just be like just room hallway room hallway room hallway. People would dig where it was convenient, where it was softer and easier to dig through, and I like to show that when I do my maps. The map I was going to show you, I took the graph paper and I divided it into sections, like 3 big sections, and I just made a big hallway, and there might be, side rooms, or it might get smaller, or it might have stairs up and down and things like that. And then they would connect, this chunk would connect to this chunk, etc. And even then there was so much area that it was just, okay, you're traveling for 5 miles down this yellow brick road with maybe a side chamber every half mile or something like that, and they would usually be empty, so I didn't have to draw the entire equivalent of 7 miles worth of tunnel. I just would have to draw just small encounters, and I could do theater of the mind for the most part, which is what I prefer to do. But before we leave, I want to show you guys a couple of the 3-dimensional products that I use. One being something I actually created, which was from the very same adventure. I called it Troll Hall because it was this this super highway underground that over the years got populated by trolls, because trolls populate, they can literally feed off themselves and reproduce by cutting off an arm and throwing it down a hallway and waiting it to grow into another troll, or at least that's how I ran it. But you may have seen this piece of terrain I built for, it was literally for the Crafters Guild on Facebook, through DM Scotty and Wylock's Armory, and they really enjoyed this. This is all made out of styrofoam. Can you see it?
Yeah.
And this was the gateway into one of the more fortified areas of that main slog through the mountain. And there's the gargoyles, including some ancient heritage miniatures way in the back there. And a bridge where the ambush took place, where the gargoyles tried to keep the party members from getting in there. And my son and I made this, and yes, it's also covered in snow effects, because for whatever reason I wanted to be able to use it elsewhere in other adventure games or role-playing games, for those of you who don't like that term. But it's all gridded out so that there's 1-inch squares in the tiles, except on the main bridge part. But I didn't want to put the grid pattern there because it was such thin styrofoam. It was actually XPS foam. And you can see that I even used some down at the bottom here. Those are actually Roman columns from wedding cakes. They come in real handy. But then the other product that our channel is literally famous for is Dungeons and Lasers. This is a 2-inch square floor piece, and it uses these little connectors that you put in the back so that you can attach floors however you want. And then with the other connector pieces, these little ones, you can put walls of various sizes. These little clips here that will hold up the walls. So you can see what you get there. And then I built up a real quick room and partial hallway. And it's all plastic and it all goes together more or less like Legos. And then it disassembles into pieces that are like this that fit in various toolboxes. And it's a real affordable system. It gives you the full customizational effect. You can do whatever you want. These walls actually have bookshelves painted in them. There's a torture chamber. There's the library. There's a whole bunch of different individual room sets that you can just mix and match and just build out. And when you're done, this toolbox here holds about 6 sets of it, and it's super easily. No, I had to paint them, Charlotte, but it's what Dungeons and Lasers is most famous for. Made by Archon Studios. If you guys go and check them out, they've got a new Kickstarter coming out in the next couple of months, and it's going to boast over 400 different miniatures with a monster manual for 5e if you're into that, all statted out, but 400 brand new unique monsters. They're centered out of Poland, and let's hope everything goes well for them out there, because every Kickstarter they put out has come out about 3 months early, which means you're looking at a 9-month return on your investment. And when you invest with these guys, you get a box of stretch goals that will literally keep you busy for a year of painting. I gave out a bunch. Charlotte, she'll attest to how massive. That was what you would get. It'll never get painted. You know what? There's some really simple tricks to get it painted. I mean, if you're not into it, I totally get it. If you're into Dwarven Forge, this stuff is less breakable, almost indestructible, because I've had Dwarven Forge stuff, and if you drop it, it will shatter, and you can lose 40, 50 bucks in a small piece like this, and good luck making it look like it was before you dropped it. This stuff, I can literally throw it as hard as I want against any surface, and it might get a little scratched, but it's not going to shatter. It's not going to break. I mean, I'm trying to break this piece, and I can't. It's good, solid model plastic, and it's not just in a fantasy genre. There are a ton of sci-fi sets as well, so you can build your interiors of starships or fortifications, all kinds of industrial looking stuff, and for the money, it's an absolute steal. You can go back, and if you look, one of our oldest videos is called Lair of the Green Dragon, and you can get the absolute best example of what you can do with this stuff. We even lit it up with LEDs, so the whole thing has like torches glowing and stuff like that. And the lights are like super cheap. They're $1 for 10 lights at the dollar store. And trust me, if you really want to go the full miniature route, and you want to, you build the dungeon and reveal parts of it as the players get to it, it is the best way to go, because literally you can store it in small little boxes, as opposed to like Dwarven Forge. I love Dwarven Forge's stuff, but I can afford it. That's not the problem. It's the storage of it. For the times when you're not going to use it, it would take up entire closets to store this stuff. This stuff I could fit in. I think I've got 4 of these little boxes and a couple of bigger boxes, and it's just that's what I use when I want to go miniature route. Now, mind you, I'm more of a theater of the mind guy, but when I'm introducing new players or younger players like my son and his friends, that's the route I go, is with miniatures and the full, cover the dining table, and they just look at it and just go, they're just eyes, they just go nuts when they realize just how in depth this can go if you really want to go that route. So you're welcome, Archon. I expect my check.
Bo,
You got my info. Blah blah blah. I mean, they sponsor us, but they don't send me any money. They send me free stuff, and that's literally
they
how
sponsor
my
you, not me.
our very first video and the entire reason for the channel was we were getting the Kickstarter in the mail, and my son said we should make an unboxing video and make a channel and show this stuff off. And if you go to our very first video, you can see my son as a tiny little squeaker. I mean, he's literally grown 2 feet since our first video. In August will be 3 years we've been doing this together, and it is so cute to watch him, being all shy compared to the way he is now. I mean, so do me the solid.
So,
Go check out the first video and look. If you guys watch our channel and you enjoy laughing at the father and son duo that we got going, go check it out and get a blast from the past, because it will melt your heart.
So, Bo asks, in the traditional dungeon adventure, how to convey feelings of three-dimensional space to your players? So I think that really starts with your how you describe your space. So I have a fairly firm grasp, being a in the engineering fields and a draftsman. I have a firm understanding of three-dimensional space to begin with, so that there's helping me. But it really is using the correct words or correct terms when you're describing a space. Now, you can use terms like cavernous. This would convey, a large three-dimensional space, while still having that underground feeling of potentially having stalactites and stalagmites dotted around your landscape. You enter a cavernous space overlooking a glass-like still mirror lake with stalactites vanishing far above into the cavern above, or into the space above, or into the darkness above. A lot of your large open 3D spaces, especially underground, are going to vanish into darkness. They're going to go beyond the light of a torch's reach. And in a lot of cases, they're going to go beyond even that of spells, like how far a spell can reach. In some rare cases, you might even, during modern games, there are spaces, even in our world, that even with I'm not going to say the most powerful flashlights, but with, standard handheld flashlights, your beam won't reach the other end of a cavern at all. It just won't, because the light just fades out before it gets there. And to convey spaces like that, you need proper descriptions, and good use of the English language, mastery of the English language to do that.
And the best way to facilitate that is to go to those places. When I was a kid, this is going to sound gross, but my friends and I, we used to go into the sewer tunnels. Okay, we used to literally play D&D or
Stormwater.
Well, here in Cali, we had different ways to get into those tunnels. I'm not going to tell you how, because I don't really want grown-ups going down there, because it's nasty. But as kids, we'd go down there, and we even had a really frightening encounter with what we thought was a giant rat, but it was a possum. We didn't know any better, but it scared the crap out of us, and we were victorious. But springtime's coming, summer vacation's coming. If you have the opportunity, go to a natural cavern. Go to, we also had, believe it or not, we had some bomb shelters from leftover from WW2 that we could literally go and explore. We busted the padlock and went into these places, and to get that feeling of what it's like to be underground in a place that's filled with cobwebs and dust and spiders and rats and the stagnant water and all those things that are going to assail your senses. If you can go to a national park and go on one of those tours of such and such cavern or something like that, do yourself a favor as a DM and as a good parent, or just for those of you who are neither, go and find a way to visit one of these places, and it will really help you be able to relay what it feels like, because you've actually experienced it, and the enthusiasm that'll come out of your voice, the emotion you'll be able to project, and the words that you'll come up with to use at the right time in your sentences, and the way you will relay this information. Exactly. If you have anything like this that you can go check out this year, do yourself a solid, and you won't regret it. You'll pick up a couple of souvenirs, a T-shirt. You'll have a good weekend or afternoon with the family or friends. Go out and do something like that, and you will be amazed how much it will stay with you. For every time you describe a dungeon, you can remember from that one encounter, that one time you went to one of these places, and you can just convince your players that they're there through your words. You'll be able to, for lack of a better word, hypnotize them into believing they are where you're describing. If you just try to make it up without ever having been underground or in a cavern or in anything like this, it doesn't come off as well. And if your friends or family or players know that you're going and you're going to go to such and such place, and you tell them, yeah, I'm doing research for the next adventure, they're going to love that. You're going to be able to, they'll be able to tell the difference from your previous narrations to your current narrations, and all the narrations after that. You'll be able to just draw on from just one afternoon of doing this, like Jaide said, with the lights, what you can see and what you can't. Mind you, I just picked up a super bright flashlight that I can literally light up the church 1,000 yards away from my house. They're wondering if they're being raided or something, or if UFOs, because I can hit them with a beam of light that will almost start a fire. I want to get one of those flashlights, but I haven't yet. But literally, go with a crappy flashlight. A lot of batteries, but a crappy flashlight, just or both, so that you can get the idea of what it would be like. Especially if you run a game like Call of Cthulhu or some other more modern game, it'll help understanding how the light's going to reflect and how much you can see and how much you can't. Be the transparent eyeball. Adventure is all around you. Yeah, that's a weird way of putting it, considering that Archon Studios logo is a creature called Bulbo the eyeball, and he's a big eyeball with. But you'll see. But yeah, and if you're going to go, camping or picnicking or something, actually pay attention to the trees and the forests and the smells and the way the ground feels under your feet, and what it's like in the morning, what it's like in the afternoon, what it's like in the evening as the sun's going down. You can draw in all these experiences and actually use them. I know so many of us gamers out there are homebodies, and we never go out, we never do any of these things, and we think we can, fake it till we make it, when it comes to the narrations and the descriptions. But one weekend of a trip like that, when you go into the trip knowing that you're gonna just soak up every light, every sound, trust me, it's worth a stack of books this high in comparison to what you'll be able to share with your friends and fellow gamers.
Yeah, I definitely have to say that, before I went on my student ambassador trips, because I was part of a program of students who would go explore cultures in their native settings around the world. I went to several countries, and it definitely helped with my descriptions of places, because my dungeons and my world spaces were exceptionally bland before I went on those trips. But one of the things I noticed, and it doesn't even have to be very far, because I went up to the boundary waters of Canada and United States with the Boy Scouts, and I was able to convey in words the things I felt, the things I saw, and the experiences I had into the game by just not just using the pictures I brought back with me to remind me of, okay, what did I feel on Wind Lake? Well, it was windy as shit. We were able to actually set sail on Wind Lake with our dining tarp, because it was just that windy. So I was able to convey to my game group, because when they're like, hey, you come across this windswept lake, on a coniferous, in the middle of a coniferous forest, and it stretches for several hundred yards across. How do you guys, and your foe has already gotten to the far side, and you can see them over there, taking their boats out of the water. Like, what do you want to do? And it would take you, weeks to go around. Well, one of the PCs is like, okay, well, are there any boats that are in good enough shape that we can, caulk and float across the lake with? I'm like, sure, let's give a survival roll going. And, sure enough, they found one. And, from that, they're like, hey, you said this is a windswept lake, right? Yes. The water is very choppy. It's very windy. The wind is actually at your back. Like, can we sail across this lake? I'm like, you know what? You absolutely can. And I gave bonus experience points for the player picking up on the windswept nature of the lake. And that's more as far as like how to design a dungeon. Like that could actually be an outdoor dungeon space where the enemy is fleeing from the players, and they're trying to use terrain to their advantage, or the dungeon in this case to their advantage, and the players are able to use a lot of the features of the encounter space as well. And again, it comes down to your how you describe things, the words that you use to give shape and impress upon your players what is there around them. Yeah. So the windswept lake has a tailwind at the moment. You're absolutely right. And then because I actually rolled the direction of the wind, and it was going across the lake towards where their enemy had gotten to. So the player coming up with the fact that, hey, can we sail across this lake, or can we figure out how to tack into the wind or whatever we need to do to get across the lake faster? I rolled for it, and I'm like, yeah, sure enough, wind's with you. Let's do this. And that was one of the experiences I had in Canada, or up in the boundary waters, is because we actually sailed across Wind Lake using that very method on canoes. The wind was at our back that day, which we were very fortunate, and we made we cut across that lake in probably a quarter of the time that it would have taken us to row that lake. So we actually got very, very far on that day's progress. We actually made up almost an entire day. So we were able to laze around the whole next day and not get rowing until midday. So, use your life experiences when you go to places. If you're in a, science fiction adventure, and you spend a lot of time in a big city, use those big cities to your advantage. Look around, and try to describe the buildings in words that could convey their scale, their size, their shape at the game table.
Believe it or not, places like hospitals and office complexes and things like that, if you can get in the elevator and, especially at night, or, on a early morning, and just walk around, you'd be amazed the kind of little things you'll notice and that you may use later on down the road, especially things like stairwells, the details of them and the elevators, and what it's like to just walk down, empty corridors full of doors, and the lighting, whether it's flickering or not, and things like that. I've done a few things like that that will help. I mean, you're probably not going to be able to go to military bases and things like that to go exploring and getting that sort of feel, but if you can get to an air show or something like that,
Yeah. And I for our first anniversary, my wife and I actually went to Chicago, and I actually got to see the Sears Tower like up close, in person, and
yeah, we went there a couple of years back.
The scale of that building, actually it's now the Willis Tower. The scale of that building is hard to put into words, and it almost gives you a sense of vertigo when you try to look up the side of the building from just one block away. And if I was to do a cyberpunk themed game, I would try to use that sense of scale, that sense of immensity, in all of the buildings, because from ground level, when you're looking up, especially if you're like an edge runner in cyberpunk, you're not of the upper class. You're not in those buildings way up high. You're on ground level.
Hollywood, North Hollywood at nighttime, anywhere around Figueroa and anywhere on Figueroa and in that immediate area. If you want to get the transition from ultimate squalor to neon freaking nightmare, hit up a place like that, in the morning, in the evening, go out and pay attention to the things around you, not just, always having your head and your nose in a book, because it makes a world of difference. See, that's a great place to go.
Scott Clark. Yep.
Call of Cthulhu, you're ready. You got like 3 separate adventures from that one, experience.
Yeah, abandoned military barracks. Yeah, you can get definitely a sense of presence from like what was there before, and we can use a lot of these abandoned territories, just from observation standpoint as dungeons within our game. Just kind of build the framework of what's there. Take pictures, take descriptions, like write things down, like what you're feeling, what you're seeing, and what you're smelling of the area. And then repurpose that data into your game. It'll bring a sense of immersion and a sense of reality, unlike just pulling something out of a book or out of your mind.
Yeah, you'll be able to sell it to them better because they'll pick up on the subtle clues, even if your players aren't versed in some of that. Subconsciously, they're going to pull it in, and they're going to sense the truth, so to speak, from you, and the enthusiasm. Like I said before, it makes a world of difference. Just spring is right around the corner, and it's going to be. I don't know about you guys, but it was kind of a rough winter in a lot of places. Heck, we even got snow today, and I live, in California, and it doesn't really snow, but like once every decade here, and it was really hail that didn't melt, but I'm going to call it snow. But go out there, just instead of buying that next new game that you don't really need, maybe spend the $50 on a an outdoor excursion somewhere, and see how that compares. You may think if you're a player, maybe not, but if you're a DM, that one memory that you can add to the index card filing system you have of all your lived experiences. Yeah, and to be honest, guys, let us know. In Discord, most of you guys can communicate with us through Discord. I personally would love to hear some of you guys' trips and photos. Our good friend James L, he just went on vacation, sent back a lot of pictures Believe it or not, even some of the things like that, even vacation spots, like he went to the beach. I haven't been to the beach in years, and it'll trigger some of those memories because I'm running a game with Jaide and Barron and Bruce and Conall and Kai, and I'm going to be able to use a lot of my own actual experiences for it, um, to help describe what they're going to be experiencing it. And it doesn't always have to be like these ugly, nasty, dingy, messed up places. Believe it or not, a good picnic, a day at the beach, unless you're, like Baron, who's going to just, fry in the sun kind of thing, um, you
I'm
know,
right there with him.
um, believe it or not, some of the more pleasant experiences in life will actually help you as well, because if you don't have the contrast between the light and the shadow, yeah, I'm asking for a lot of picks. uh you have to have that contrast. You
You
have
might
to
get more
have
than you
that
bargained for.
Shire. That's why Tolkien started out with the Shire, is so you had something to fall in love with and worry about losing as you went closer and closer to Mordor. You had something to be homesick for, something to want to protect, your home, your country, what have you, someplace, something that you loved that was worth fighting for. You have to have that contrast, and getting a nice vacation will help remind you of what you would like your players to love. Maybe it's that tavern. Maybe it's that dumbass tavern that everybody starts in, but when the players realize that their favorite tavern, could be burnt down by the invading orcs or goblins, and you let them have that last night at the tavern where everybody's, hugging and drinking and singing and all that, the smells, the taste, the sounds, and then the next day, you know, orcs are on the horizon. It will make a big difference, giving them a reason to get immersed into the game, to feel connections to things other than the gold, the experience, and the leveling up. Because for me, when you get to a certain point in gaming, a lot of that stuff is meaningless. You want the other stuff. You want the stuff that is priceless. The home, the family, the friends, the country, the things like that. And I mean, unless you're running nothing but evil murder hobos, then you can just tune this out. But for the most part, I really love that. The whole idea of being able to connect to a place that doesn't exist, but yet it does.
Yeah, and if if you're really able to, get out and explore like castles, go on a castle tour, if you have one close
Cheers,
to you.
buddy.
Um, yeah, because I actually got to explore Edinburgh Castle, like on the grounds. I actually got to walk the entirety of the castle, or not the entirety, but a good majority of it, and that did more for me in being able to explain, being on the battlement of a castle, or walking through the echoey halls
You're making me
of
jealous,
a
man.
chamber.
You're making me jealous. I mean, if you want to hear about, jungles of South America, I'm your guy. But when it comes to,
I do want to hear
the,
about Jungles of South
the,
America because that sounds
the,
awesome.
the, the European, that whole thing, the whole, fantasy European style thing, I never got a chance to do any of that. And now I won't fly, so I'm kind of SOL. Don't really want to get on a boat for something like that. But yeah, if you guys have had those things, cherish those memories and share them. You don't have to tell people you're sharing them. When you, like, if Jaide starts running a game and he's describing, what he just talked about, from the player's point of view or what they could see, you know, I guarantee you that those narrations are going to shine more than the made up narrations, as it were. From things that he has never experienced, and same for me. You'll see a difference, guys.
Yeah. So
Oh, I know,
with
that's got
that,
to
I
be that's
think,
got to be amazing.
yeah. So with that, I think we're going to wrap this one up for the evening. I do thank you for taking the time with us. Huh?
2 hours exactly. That works.
Yeah. Yep. So, Shadow, do you have anything coming up that you'd like to express to the people?
Just have a wonderful spring and summer this year, guys. God knows we've all earned it. And if you get the chance, do me a solid and go check out our very first video if you're fans of me and my son's hijinks, because not enough people realize how far we've come, especially my son, from the little squeaker that he was to the teenage angsty know-it-all that he's become, that we've all grown to love. And I'd love to see some more people just get to see that, because a lot of people will just watch the new stuff and forget about the old stuff. But that old stuff, that's the stuff that we made a point to save on hard disks all over the house so that we never lose it. And hopefully you guys will all get to know what that's like. And if not, adopt a kid, or adopt some youngsters and get them into the hobby, because that's we've all talked about what's wrong with the hobby over the past couple of months, and what's really missing is the youngsters getting into it and getting to experience what we all experienced, as opposed to what the corporations want them to experience. And if folks like us can get out there and mentor some kids, go to your local library or something and start up a game, and let's get more gamers into the hobby, but let's get them in the right way and not the kind of corporate way that we're seeing so much of. And like I said, enjoy the hell out of it.
Play games that are out of print.
Yeah.
So, now I will be on Table Riggers tomorrow with Shadow. I can't exactly remember the topic. I think it's something to do with simulation game versus. I can't even remember. Like I said, I can't remember it. So unfortunately, I was sick. Unfortunately, I was sick last week during Table Breakers, and actually all through the weekend. Strep throat is a pain in the throat, a pain in the neck. And we were actually not able to hold our roundtable discussions. So currently, Gatekeepers does not have planned content for next week, but I will be working on that hopefully this weekend, or maybe starting tomorrow. I'll start putting together a plan for the next month. I'll be able to share that with everyone on the Discord, and then eventually on our slides here. So if you enjoyed this evening of Gatekeepers, please consider hitting that like button. And if you really enjoyed the Gatekeepers this evening, consider subscribing to the channels linked in the description below. I thought Conall was going to be in here, and so I put his contact information in there, but he unfortunately was not able to show. So this has been Gatekeepers, and well, until next time, have a great night, everyone.